raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
I was a typical man. Many of the big decisions in my life, including resigning and divorcing my wife after 13 years, I made by myself. They were not on the table to discuss with my golf buddies. This is a quote from our guest today, Nick Jonsson, in an interview in Business Desk magazine. And we've all heard the saying that it's lonely at the top. Well, Nick is here to show us that it doesn't have to be and ways to get out of that. Welcome to the Men Talking Mindfulness show. I'm John McCaskill. Each week, my co-host Will Schneider and I work to break down and demystify an aspect of mindfulness and make it meaningful to you. Again, this week, we're going to delve into executive or leadership loneliness and what we can do, resources that are available, and how we can help others in these positions and situations. Prior to that, though, I'm going to turn it over to Will for some announcements.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, Nick. Great to have you here today. Thank you so much. Hey, there is some space. So join us on our Mindfulness Adventure Retreat on May 18th to 21st over on the East Coast in upstate New York. We're going to move, breathe, and we're going to get mindful during this 4-day, 3-night immersive experience that includes a 4-week integration program to help weave these practices into your life. So sign up. If you sign up before March 17th, you'll save $200. Head to mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat to book your spot before they're all gone. And hey, help us grow the show. Maybe take a screenshot right now and post it somewhere on your social and say, hey, I'm becoming more mindful because I'm listening to Men Talking Mindfulness. We'd really appreciate that. And maybe someone out there who's listening to the show will appreciate it too, because they'll become more mindful. And lastly, hey, help us grow our YouTube. We're growing over there. It's been a lot of fun to get more involved with YouTube and see how it goes, see how it kind of works together. So please subscribe to our channel over there, and thank you for that. So here, this is our guest bio. This is Nick Jonsson, a Singapore-based Swedish expat, is the co-founder and managing director of one of Asia's premier networking organization. It's called Executive Global Network, EGN, in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, which is a confidential peer group network providing more than 700 senior executives and business owners a safe haven to share their challenges, receive support, and learn from each other. Nick nearly died of alcoholism because of his lack of emotional resources available to him. While the external world continued to view Nick and as a successful executive, he was extremely depressed and defeated. When he hit the wall, he took control, got himself all kinds of help, and today is a consultant and author of Executive Loneliness, The 5 Pathways to Overcoming Isolation, Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in a Modern Business World. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. Just before we jump in, we're going to just do our 5-breath practice. And so whatever you're doing, you can do this while you're driving, mowing your lawn, working out, right? Or maybe just sit at your desk and close your eyes, ground your hands on your feet if you want to do that. Maybe even close your eyes. And let's start with a nice exhale out the mouth. Empty all the way out like you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste, empty. And then take a nice satisfying inhale through the nose for 5 seconds. And exhaling slowly out the mouth, 5. Push it out gently. Good. Again, in 5 seconds. Exhale, 5. Few more. In 5. Out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 2 more. In for that 5. Out 5. Great. Last one. Inhale, 5. Out, easy 5. Good, awesome. Take a moment, make a little some easy movement if you like, and open our eyes. And Nick, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Will. Thank you so much for inviting me and to talk about this important topic.
Yeah, awesome. John, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll jump right in. So, in our research preparing for this episode, we found out that according to the Harvard Business Review, half of CEOs express feelings of loneliness, and 61% of those believe loneliness hinders their job performance. Now, you, Nick, you have been and continue to be an executive leading organizations. You mentioned in your article on executive loneliness, when executives feel stressed or anxious about work, they usually do nothing to address it. Often for fear, people will judge them or doubt their ability to lead, that they fear being judged. How legitimate are these fears, and what can leaders do about it?
Well, thank you for the question, John. And indeed, when I wrote my book on this topic in 2019, I also surveyed executives about the loneliness. And the numbers that you mentioned are quite aligned with actually the findings I have. When I started writing the book in 2019, about 30% of the senior executives that I interviewed actually and surveyed for the book expressed loneliness in the workplace. And then I redid the same survey in 2020 during the pandemic, and then the numbers had doubled to 60%. And that's for an audience in Southeast Asia. So we can see that indeed the numbers are quite in line with that what you have. And it is true that people are indeed feeling lonely in the workplace, but they do everything to hide it. So a follow-up question I asked the executives, if you now are feeling lonely in your workplace, is this something that you are talking to anyone about? And 84% said that they would not talk to anybody about it in the workplace. So that means that everyone is really indeed keeping it secret.
Yeah. Why the secrecy? Like what? A lot of things we see as we continually produce this show and research our many different guests on many different topics is this whole idea of hiding our feelings as and I'm just saying I shouldn't just qualify all leaders as men, but I'd imagine or is it all leaders that kind of like have this feeling I need to, or have this idea that I need to hide my feelings and show no weakness, or is it typically more men or just it's everywhere across the executive leadership branch?
It seems to be more prone among men indeed, and I have a few expressions in our book when I describe this, and one of them is I call it this a smiling depression, where people perhaps are hiding behind that smile. We live in a society where we put up the best pictures on social media, we put up the awards, the diplomas, all the great achievements on LinkedIn. So that's one part of the story. That's a story that we want everyone to see, because we're so scared and have so much anxiety to lose perhaps the job we have, the salary it comes with, the benefits, the bonuses, and so on, that we do everything to protect that because we're so fearful of losing it. So that's what everyone will see on the outside. But what's in the inside, all the fears and anxiety, we hold it onto ourselves as firmly as we can, and we don't want anyone to find out about this. Because imagine if they do, then I won't be up for the next promotion. I won't get the next job.
Right.
And when my HR team will decide who will get the new job or new assignment, then perhaps I won't get it. So that's sort of the fear that everyone have. And I also call this an anxious overachiever, which is a very common term for senior executives. And if I'm just reflecting back on myself, that's exactly how it was. And it started already at university. When I look back even further, as a high school student, I was struggling in school, but at university, suddenly I realized that I chose some subjects that worked for me. I could get a sense and a smell and a taste for success. And once I managed to hit top of a class, then I decided I want to really go for it. I want to top other classes. I wanted a scholarship. And you would do everything to elbow your way to get that recognition, that feeling. And that is something that I brought with me in the workplace. And as I spoke with many executives, that's how it is. Anxious overachievers is something that is very common, especially among senior executives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anxiety in some ways is what gets executives to be successful. Because they're anxious, they put in the work because they fear failure, which is, right or wrong, it's a driving force. So we can, in some regards, see that and be thankful for it. But the other side of that coin is that it hurts us emotionally, physically, mentally. And, I want to touch on something because I actually had a note on it and you talked about it, is the use of social media. Because executives, very highly successful leaders, wherever they may be, often post the good stuff on social media, and the perception from outside is that these people have it all figured out. How can a leader use social media to their advantage in this regard?
Well, I think, and I did the same until 2019. Basically, I did the same. I was also just sharing the awards and all the things that you're doing to build up this perception and the image that this is someone who has it all together. Once I changed it though, and I made a video of when I started a charity campaign to raise money and funds after a friend and colleague of mine died of suicide in Singapore, a senior executive. And I made a video when I announced this, and that video went viral on LinkedIn because it was so uncommon that someone actually talked about depression and suicide and so on. That's how this all started. The next day I was on radio and I was then on TV. I had a 4 pages feature in the business newspaper here, because that's how rare it is that someone who's a senior executive, someone in that role, is actually speaking up about this.
And also, I'd say also refreshing as well for here's somebody in a leadership position, and you probably spoke to the hearts and the feelings of so many other executives, even the publishers of those articles, be like, oh, I know what this guy's, or I'm so glad that you came out with this. But I think it's so fascinating that, we hide behind the smile of depression, or the smiling depression, right? Where on the inside, we're just eating ourselves alive. And then to, shine the light on that darkness, all of a sudden, a lot of your problems are solved. And then you're rewarded, for speaking out and for being vulnerable. And that's one thing we continually see here on the show, is the more John and I, and we're kind of the leaders of this show and the leaders of our community that we're growing, the more vulnerable and authentic we are, the more people are just continually more attracted, the more people share our different posts and our different podcasts because of that vulnerability. So do you feel it's healthy for a leader to demonstrate this vulnerability, for both themselves and the organization? And what is that? And what might that look like if you're in an organization and you're like, you know what, I have a problem, or, do you give them like ways to kind of speak to their problems in a vulnerable way and to their people?
Well, I left the corporate world about 8 years ago when I started then EGN. So now it's I'm then the franchise owner of this business here in Southeast Asia. So it's a little bit easier for me to speak up as I'm sort of my own boss. It might not be fair for me to compare myself with someone who's working for a big multinational company where they perhaps are very scared. Even if they wanted to speak up, maybe they need to get the approval of the head of communication. Am I allowed to do this, right? So that's how our society is set up, right? And that's the issues that people are facing. And everyone is therefore scared, can I say this? Can I do that? And I noticed that also when I have my podcast here in Southeast Asia, and I want to invite some people to talk. They're very mindful about what they say, because maybe someone will hear this or see this, and I'm not allowed. So we need to really put in a lot of efforts. And thanks for what you're doing here. And the fact that we are talking about this is where we need to be. We need to talk about it, and we need to change this. And vulnerability, also as I talk about in my book, needs to become a strength. And now these days, I'm living a life which I love. I wish I could do when I was a senior executive as well, where I'm honest, open, and as you said, you become a magnet. People absolutely love you when you are just being yourself, and that's now my biggest strength. If someone want to do business with me, they are attracted because they know, well, I can work with Nick because he will be honest about this.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, you mentioned something there in the fact that you have a podcast in Southeast Asia, and some people may be hesitant to come on your podcast. A couple of things. One, culture. What does or how does culture play into this? Being geographical culture, the ethnicities that we may come from, and how does ego come into play? And then for both of them, culture and ego, how do you recommend someone overcome them?
So when it comes to the culture, the most of the people I'm working with here are Westerners and mainly Americans. There's a lot of big multinational companies who have their head office in Asia, in Singapore. So those are the most of my members and clients and so on that I'm working with. But of course, also a lot of the locals are increasingly joining our network and so on. So there are also more from various countries in Asia is joining, and there's a huge difference. While perhaps we don't talk about these things in the modern, so should I say, the Western world. In Asia, it sits much, much deeper. The stigma sits there a lot more. They talk a lot less about it, and it's really, really hidden. And just to give you an idea here, until 2019, a suicide attempt in Singapore was considered a crime, which means that if it happens in your family or in your workplace, then you're scared of reporting it and asking and seeking help because you will report it to the police. So therefore, you can imagine that this is something that, and that's why in 2019 we could start talking about that when it was decriminalized only.
Wow. That's a lot. Wait, so let me understand that correctly. So you weren't allowed to attempt suicide, or you can be criminally charged if you were? Is that, or
you correct? You are not allowed, and it will be considered a crime if you have an attempt at it. Yes.
Wow, that's heavy.
You're punished. You're already punishing yourself so terribly, right? I mean, to be able to take that step and try to attempt to take your life, but then to be punished again for it. It's like, what kind of person are you left with? I mean,
exactly.
Wow,
so if you have a child who this happened to, you wouldn't even gonna seek help or ask for help for that reason, right? So, but that has now changed. So that's why when I started to talk about this, it's a long way to go here, and I'm also then a volunteer for the suicide prevention agency here called the Samaritans SOS, where we have a 24-hour hotline now, and of course, more and more people are calling now, because now it's actually, we can have all this support here on the ground, and for that, it's baby steps, and that's why I'm so involved in this over here in Singapore to start making a difference in Asia, because this is just new things, the fact that we can actually talk about this.
So that's the culture side, right? Coming back to the ego side, how and again, a lot of this has to do with the anxieties that we feel as executives, and then I think the ego comes into play a lot with the masculine energy. How do we get past that ego and tap into that vulnerability again? Because that just now, I think since Brene Brown kind of stood up and said that vulnerability is a superpower, are people realizing that? But how do we get past that ego and tap into the vulnerability?
Yeah, ego can be a big blocker here, because we need to, and what I would see with executives, it's about deflating the ego. It's about letting ego go. And for many people, including myself, that came from the gift of desperation, which I found when when my life was in turmoil and when I fell into alcohol addiction, and some events went against me. I went into a divorce. I resigned from a job. I moved country yet another time, and before I knew it, I was I was extremely isolated and sick. And when I reached that rock bottom and I found that gift of desperation, I had nowhere else to go, and that was a painful place to be at. But once you're there and you're letting ego go, then you can patch together a new life where you realize that it's about being of service to other people and being there for others. And here it's really about making sure that, realizing that you are not running the universe. There's something bigger than you out there. And that is what this is all about deflating the ego.
Well, how do you walk, imagine John or I or one of your executives, like how do you walk us into like even a conversation or understanding that vulnerability is so profound and so helpful for the health of themselves as well as the health of the organization and what they're trying to do?
Yeah, you have to be very careful about this because people will naturally, and even myself, if I would go back a few steps earlier, and if people would have told me, Nick, you're drinking too much, that's not good I would do everything I could to defend myself and do everything to defend my addiction. So if you're approaching someone about this, it's very difficult to start the conversation. So what I found is that you need to first build a relationship and you need to be vulnerable first with the other person. And people only want to talk to people who have similar issues and similar problems. So that's what I did then. And when I joined a 12-step program, in that instance, it was with other people who've gone through similar challenges before. And I felt I could relate to these people. They were sharing first and I was sitting quiet. And after a couple of meetings, listening to these people, I started to feel that I was not alone. I felt that the rest were just like me. Then I felt safe to start sharing. So that's what I would do in any instance here. And that's what I'm doing when I'm sharing with you today. And that's what I did when I wrote the book. And it was the publisher who insisted that my story would be there. I thought this would be a book with a survey, interviews about other people. And the publisher even insisted, you need to be on the cover. We start with your story because otherwise they will not read this. So that's what we did. And the first chapter is my story. And I actually challenged myself, and I was just remarried when I wrote the book, and my new wife was with me when I hit rock bottom, and she kept reading it over and over and correcting it to making sure it was the full ugly truth. Because now when people read my book, once they read the first chapter, I start getting messages, so they start calling me and they open up because they realize I was completely honest. They feel safe to be honest with me as well.
Yeah, there's something about a common humanity, shared humanity, and you said like a couple, three words that I'm doing some. I'm going to become a ambassador for compassion, and one thing that they talk about when understanding or trying to get into a place of common humanity, really connected with somebody, is realizing that what you said earlier, just like me. I did that. I was just like me. And just being able to identify that within and helping other people outside is just, it just taps us into that, as you know, and as you've experienced, as you're talking about, of like, we all have the same problems. We might think that it might be a little different because we work in a different office or work in a different company, or because, we have different circumstances surrounding us. But overall, it's like, I think we need to talk about our problems, talk about our feelings, understand that other people have gone through the same thing like millions of times before. Like, centuries of people have had these same problems. Just because it's 2023 and not like 1650, we've been still suffering as human beings, and we can escape that.
Let's talk about how to escape that. And I think you kind of put together a game plan or a schematic in your book of sorts. What are the 5 pathways that you outline in your book to overcoming this executive loneliness, the stress, the ego, and everything else? What are those 5 pathways?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to talk them through. And the first step is what I'm calling taking stock. And imagine, for example, if you are a shop owner, you would naturally do an inventory check once a month or once a quarter, or at least a big one once a year. But as human beings, how often are we really taking a serious look at ourselves, an honest review of ourselves, getting a pen and paper out, perhaps a spreadsheet, where we really write down everything? And that is what happened when I came into recovery and you were given a sponsor. That's the first thing basically you're asked to do. It's really looking at yourself and identifying what it is. And this is of course related also to the ego then, but when you start putting down the issues you have. And in my instance then, it was that I was overweight, I had an alcohol addiction, I had a lot of broken relationships. I then had to write down the names of these relationships. I had some credit cards that were unpaid. I had some debt. I had to write down all these kind of things that were not right. And that was just the first step to get that list on paper.
Yeah, it sounds almost as though, you were looking for help in other ways. Obviously, you were looking for help at the bottom of a bottle with alcohol. You were looking for help in these relationships that may have not had any real depth to them. You were just kind of using them as a way, almost like a Band-Aid. The credit card, I know a lot of the time people do, retail therapy. They'll go and spend a lot of money to make themselves feel better. And then, 5 minutes later, after they've bought their $5,000 outfit, they feel even worse than they did before. It sounds as though that's where you were, but you stopped and you took stock, and you asked the question. You said, "How often do we do that?" I know that when I was leading organizations, I never took stock. I was just, hey, I'm too busy, quote unquote, to take stock. But if you take a step back and you realize, if you stop to take that stock, stop to take stock.
There you go, John.
Yeah, you can actually coin that trademark.
Got
please.
it, done.
Right? So you stop to take that stock in yourself. You're going to be a better leader for it. It may take some time, but you're going to be a better leader for it. And then your organization, which is the one that you're working for anyway, is going to be better for it. So I love that take stock first step. What's the next one?
Once you have that list clear, and if you need help to do that stock list, people can work with a coach, a mentor, or to get help, someone ask them the question, you get done. But once that list is done, it's really about asking for help, and really thinking about, for each single of these items, who can help me with this? Is it some information that is available online? Is it some organization that can help me? Is it a doctor? Do I need a coach for that? And so on. So you basically just take that list and you can go line by line and writing options for people you can talk to, people you can ask for. So you're starting to move towards the solution here.
Are those ways that people ask for help? Are they? I mean, obviously, in some ways, it'd be unique per individual. But do you see some commonality when you're working with different coaches or something like that in asking for help? Do you see the same kind of patterns repeating themselves?
Well, the most important here is to start to write down on that paper, who can help me with what, and ideally having someone accountable. So when I did this, I had a sponsor supporting me. So if you have a coach or a mentor, take you through this, or a friend you trust, because otherwise this list might never happen to go anywhere, because naturally people are so scared to ask for help. And that is what we are going through here, by making this into a system, by following the steps to make sure we are moving forward. Otherwise, it's likely that they won't just take any action at all.
And that's the first step to vulnerability too. Is admitting that you're admitting there's a problem, right? And then what to do with that problem? I can't do this alone, obviously. If I've gotten to this point in my career, so I need to ask for help. And so I love this. So I love taking stock. It's an amazing mindfulness practice. Stepping back, observing, right? Observing honestly, taking an honest assessment. And then the next one is like asking for help, accessing, like going into vulnerability. So what's after that?
Well, it's about getting healthy, and in my instance, that meant that on the list, I was overweight. I had an issue with alcohol. I had a high blood pressure. There was many issues, and because I've been drinking too much, also there was liver and kidney issues and all these things. And it was about getting healthy. So I had to go to a doctor to get support. I also signed up with someone who could help me with everything from lifestyle coaching, including changing my exercise routine, nutrition, and everything else. He made me buy wearable devices so he could track, and we set up. Because there we go. So at that instance, he built up a plan, and I was so unfit that I just walking 2-3 miles a day was the starting point. Just getting out, getting some healthy habit there. And also at this instance, I was given medication for my depression and so on. And that was not something that I wanted to retain, but I was given basically a time frame how I would be able to tape this off and getting instead the exercise to support me naturally. And I call in my book then the natural happy pill is what I call exercise, because after 3 months I managed to taper off the medication and instead rely on exercise for my well-being and other mindfulness practices and so on. So that's really what the third step was about. It's about getting your body physically ready.
Go ahead,
John. Yeah, well, take us a little further in your journey then, because like in your bio, we talked about you being one of the top 1% of your age group in triathlons. So that's obviously, is that something? Obviously, it sounds like you're something you continually are doing. So did this kind of lead you into being competitive and kind of wanting to pursue more health? Or maybe start with like, what did that health do for you mentally and physically? And then also in the world, like as a man, as a leader, as a husband, I think it'd be very helpful for our audience to hear that.
Yeah, so I had already tasted triathlons and marathons and so on before I came into recovery and before I joined the 12-step program. But my life then as a senior executive, managing the pressure, the stress at the workplace, and then hiding everything. And after work, either I would go to the exercise in the gym, or I would go to the bar and have some drinks. And while I used to balance that quite well, eventually it became too much of the alcohol and not enough exercise. And I would sign up for races and I would control myself, control my alcohol addiction by knowing that I need to exercise. But, you know, as life catch up with you, increasingly I was going for the bar, catching up with friends instead of the exercise. So it was this constant battle I had inside myself. And it was only after I hit rock bottom and I dealt with this, controlling the addiction and basically giving up and remaining sober. And I'm, touch wood, now almost sober for 5 years. And that gave me a life worth, thank you. And that gave me a life worth living, where I no longer have this battle of this addiction. So I can exercise, and it's taken me to a completely new level. So the coach I signed up with, we are still in touch, but I'm working with one coach now who's actually 8 times top 10. He's been in Kona, the World Championship of Ironman. Wow. And he is now coaching me on a day-to-day basis also. So therefore, I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams, and when I go to training camps with athletes and so on. So I'm for my age now, turning 48. I'm considered one of the best for my age group in this sport.
Congratulations! That is awesome. I did a half Ironman back in October, and I'm 45, and I'd been. I won't say completely out of exercise, but definitely not at the level that I'd been needed to for a half Ironman. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of discipline to do the exercise, but also to set aside the time for it. But then when you do it, you definitely start to feel the benefits, because I'll be, again, completely transparent. Since October, when the race was, I've dropped off. And I can feel it. I can feel how, yes, physically I feel different, but emotionally I feel different too. And I reached out to Will yesterday, coming back to accountability. I was like, hey, Will, I need some accountability, brother, because now I don't have a race that I'm working towards. I need somebody to check in with me every so often, say, hey, did you get your workout in? Did you get your meditation in? Because of what that can do, the physical exercise, what it can do for you mentally. But you also mentioned, as you had that balance between the bar and the bike, if you will, right?
John,
I know, trademark that.
You're killing it, right?
Anyway, so you had that balance, but then you started going to the bar more often. But you specifically said going to the bar and catching up with my friends. That is actually, I think, if I understand it correctly, the next step that you recommend is having healthy relationships. Now, if you're just going to the bar and putting down a 6-pack or a whole bunch of shots, and then that's not necessarily a healthy relationship. Can you talk about the importance of the healthy relationship and the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship?
Yes, and what I had done then in step 1 there, when I took stock and I wrote down the broken relationships, that would be people perhaps who I had hurt in the past, people who I had not done right. For example, I could have had some broken relationships. Maybe I'd done some incidents when I was younger, which have perhaps hurt my parents. I had not spoken with my sister for a few years when I wrote this down, of an incident that happened a few years ago. I had left some jobs and it was perhaps not in the best way. So here it was really about repairing those relationships. And to then answer your question, to compare healthy relationships versus the damaged relationships, it's about, again, very much related to the ego here, because we naturally have this feeling that we want to win, perhaps, and we shut people off, or we say things that we don't want, but then we have the last word. But that might mean that we have a lot of pain inside. And what we find out here is that we might walk around with something that happened 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And it might even be something as simple as, your neighbor changed the color on the garage or something, and you had an argument about that, and then you decided for 20 years to not talk about it. But
that sounds like that actually happened, Nick. Was that an actual thing? So you pulled that out way too easily. It sounds like something that actually happened.
You got it. And then you walk around with that resentment inside you for years, right? Without dealing with it. And it's normally something as simple and stupid like that. But because of the ego, we don't deal with it. So here is this step where you really got to, again, look back at that list and be accountable with someone, a mentor, a sponsor, or whoever it will be, or a coach. And you need to tick them boxes. And you have to decide and discuss with this person, will it be harmful if I go back to this person? It might be an ex-wife or an ex-girlfriend, and maybe it's not healthy to go back to that person and apologize, because you might stir something up that shouldn't be. But what you can do then with your coach is that you can write an apology letter, and then you can throw that in the bin or burn that letter, or you can pray on it, or pray for that person, or whatever it may be. But in my case, and let me mention about my credit card debt, because what happened there was that that is something that I wrote down. And of course, that means that I have a relationship with this bank, which is full of fear. I'm worried, will I receive an email from that bank? As soon as I see that bank, naturally you will have a feeling that there's something that you didn't do right there. And that relationship had to be repaired. And naturally, it means that you need to pay back that loan as well. And I did just that. Last year was my last debt that I cleared. And once I did that, the feeling was just fantastic. And because it had been lying there for a few years, the bank was surprised and happy when I did reach out to them. And it also meant that actually the other people they've been chasing, tried to chase me, I could go back to these people, and it was previous people I worked with in the past. I could tell them, by the way, I'm sorry about that bank having to reach out to you for my own garbage. Just to let you know, they're now done the right thing. It's paid off, and it's done. And then, what happens then, I also explained that I've been in recovery, I had some issues. And then the other person I made amends to said, oh, I'm just going through this now. I'm 6 weeks sober. I also had some incidents, and then now I have a beautiful relationship supporting this person who also going through some difficult times. So again, vulnerability, deflating the ego. It all comes back to this.
Yeah. And also what I like, but it's not just the fostering healthy relationships. Like, it's not just our relationships with other people, but it sounds like that you just had a healthier relationship with your finances, with money, right? And how that created health, within you in a new way, gave you a different perspective, opened up, some doors on the inside that were closed because of this shame and guilt or whatever about all this debt, which I know financial instances can bring up to a lot of people. But it's just could you talk a little bit more about is part of that fostering healthy relationships, developing a healthy relationship with yourself as well?
Absolutely, because it's about as you cleared up all these relationships, and I done the steps now. By the way, I'm on my 4th round, and I'm working with a sponsor who's holding myself accountable. And I have myself now on the list, still 22 people who I need to really think about, to go back to and making amends. And I'm going back deeper into my childhood and so on, and people even from my high school that I said things to that I realized now that was not a very nice thing to do. And these people might be my friends on Facebook, but they sort of the silent ones. We don't talk, and I not had deep conversations with them. But I'm now can ping them and say, hey, I'm going to be home in Sweden this summer. Do you have time for a coffee or lunch in June? Then you see them for coffee, and you sort of by catching up, and then you say, I remember, by the way, when we were 16 years of age, I remember that I did this to you, and I just want to say that I'm sorry for that. And they most often they will not even remember it, and It's been something that therefore you have walked around with on your shoulders, giving you pain. And you can imagine that we have 100 or maybe thousands of these small incidents. So if you just repair them, there's something that is being lifted for you. So indeed, it's about the relationship with yourself. The self-respect is coming back to you.
There you go.
And that is that. And then if you practice this by clearing up the past, you want to come to a stage when you do this first on a daily basis, and eventually immediately you catch yourself when you sent that email that wasn't right. You send a message that wasn't right. You catch yourself, and immediately you recall it, or you come back to them and say, that did not come out right, I'm so sorry. And then every day is clean, and you're walking healthy, moving forward, you sleep better.
Amen to that, which is tied to that, that get healthy piece. So it's healthy relationships foster getting healthy. So what is that? The number 4 helps with number 3. So let's talk about. We just recently had a guy on our show, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. That's actually his name, Marcus Aurelius Anderson. And he had a great book that Will and I went through. And we have not had a chance to get to your book, but I definitely want to. In this book, it's called The Gift of Adversity. And he has the formula for purpose. And the formula that he outlines for purpose is priorities minus distractions equals your purpose. And from what I understand, your 5th kind of pathway to overcoming that executive loneliness is finding your purpose. Can you talk about how important that is, and then how to go about it?
Definitely. And it's about really tidying it all up today, what we've discussed here. And it's about, again, deflating your ego, realizing and accepting that you're not the center of the universe, accepting that there's something perhaps bigger than yourself out there in the universe. Because once you come to that realization, everything changes. And it's not about you. It's about being there for other people, being of service. And we can see many times perhaps our children or teenagers struggling with what should I do in my life? What should I work with? What should I be? And many times perhaps as adults, we gave up on that. We were just thrown into a workplace and we lived our whole life and getting that paycheck and getting used to that. And then we don't really perhaps stop ever to question, what do I really love to do? Where do I want to be? And perhaps that's something that hit me so hard then when I was 40 years, and it doesn't have to be that hard. We can do this even without getting a divorce, without resigning from a job, without getting an addiction. So it's about taking that break and looking at ourselves and going through these steps we just discussed to clean it up. Because then once you've done that, you're empty inside from all the pains and so on, and you can actually then start being of service for your community and do the things that you love to do, which for me now is very much related to things. One is the sport and living a life where I'm feeling great, eating well, sleeping well, and exercising and being around people who love that, but also to give back. And what I really love to do now is helping other people. And when I first came into recovery, people were there, volunteers were there to help me, and I want to give back now for the rest of my life and help others and sharing my experiences and taking them through, because that gives me a meaning. And every time I'm helping someone and getting out of myself, and it's not about poor me or self-pity, and instead it's about being of service. So that's the space where I'm happy. And I encourage every listener to also take a look at themselves and taking that break and giving themselves that space. And that comes from mindfulness practice when we go deeper in ourselves and find that purpose.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I find when I start to get into a slump, the thing that pulls me out of that slump faster than anything else is giving back to someone else or helping to lift them up, being of service to someone else. I mean, again, complete transparency. That's one of the reasons we do the show. Yes, it's to help everyone that listens, but in all honesty, it's all about me. I want to feel good. I'm just kidding.
I'm just serving John's ego. That's it. I just serve John's ego. That's my role. Thanks, John.
I'm joking.
I know.
But hey, Nick, this has been a fantastic and enlightening episode. Thank you so much for sharing what you've shared. I know our audience is going to get a lot from it. It's going to resonate with them, and the 5 pathways to overcoming that executive loneliness. It's hugely important, and I would love to put the resources out for anyone who is experiencing executive loneliness to reach out to you. How do our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so they can look me up there, or on my website otherwise is nickjonsson.com, and it's nickjonsson.com. Thank you very much.
Great. Yes, and we'll make sure those are in the show notes for everyone to get a hold of you afterwards. So as I said before we started, we're going to close this show up with a closing practice, and then we will be done. So let's breathe. Let's bring our attention to our breath and get comfortable. Get comfortable. Close your eyes if it's comfortable and safe. And just don't even feel that you need to force anything. Don't force your breath, but just be aware of it. Pay attention to the rise and fall of your diaphragm on the breath in and breath out. And notice how the air feels when you breathe in versus how it feels as you breathe out. Notice where the air enters as you inhale and where it leaves as you exhale. And even in this short practice, you may have noticed that your mind has wandered off. And if that's the case, that's perfectly okay. Just bring yourself back to focusing on the breath, the physical aspects of each breath, your breath. And we'll conclude with one deep cleansing breath together. Begin by breathing out, exhaling all your air. Bringing that navel to your spine. Deep breath in through your nose, ideally. Filling those lungs up all the way. Extra sip at the top. Hold and relax. Relax, relax. And now bring some movement back in. And Nick, thank you so much for being with us today. Sincerely appreciate the conversation. And I will turn it over to Will to wrap it up and put a bow on it.
Yeah, once again, thank you, Nick. And as I kind of reflect in my mind in this episode, I heard a lot about ego, heard a lot about vulnerability, and really that whole self-checking and how how healthy it is to be vulnerable, to be honest, like and I like Nick, that taking action. It's like being in your body. Like, how many episodes do we hear, like, part of the health is not just, yes, mental health is very important, but how a lot of ways that we maintain and attain mental health is through physical health, taking care of your body, like eating well, getting proper sleep, like cutting out the alcohol, the sugar, and all the stuff that doesn't serve the body and the mind in a proper and uplifting and life-affirming way. So, Nick, anything else before we roll?
Yeah, just a last thank you to you, John and Will, and also to all the listeners. One last message, perhaps. And if there's some pain you have inside you, or if there's something on your mind, some issues, just be not scared to ask for help. There's so many people who are willing to help you. There will be friends, there will be family, there will be coaches, mentors, there will be therapists, there will be psychologists, but also there will be all these wonderful anonymous organizations with volunteers. So if you have an issue, may it be addiction, gambling, whatever it is, look someone up and ask for help. That's my final message today to everyone.
That's perfect, Nick.
Perfect way to end it. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Until next time, take care.
Thank you, everybody. Peace. Thanks, Nick.
Joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.